Welcome to Lived In, a podcast series by Hemby Home Co. Lived In is all about interior styling for the ordinary home. If you live in an ordinary house on an average street and you love design, this podcast is for you. Many of us long to infuse the places in which we dwell with both style and livability. But we also have to stick to realistic budgets. What does it look like to live in a space that transitions with you as life does? How do you build equity while creating a space that truly feels like home? And what can you do to make a space yours when it doesn't belong to you? Join me, Hemby Co, a realtor, content manager, and interior advisor, and let's find out. Welcome. It is such a joy to be back after 2 weeks. It always feels so much longer than 2 weeks, which is strange. But anyway, I hope you're all doing well. How good was our last episode with Jennifer Vreeland McDermott? I know that we had our technical difficulties, but she added so much value in terms of how to essentially upgrade, build a grade homes. I think particularly in terms of having a clear vision of what to keep and what to switch out during the process. I think that was a really helpful and eye-opening kind of tidbit, the fact that it might sometimes cost more during the process to switch things out versus just waiting and changing it after the fact. Anyway, if you missed it, I will link to it in the show notes so that you can check it out. All right, let's get into this week's episode. Why does good design cost so much? Now, before I even get into explaining this, I don't want to give any kind of false impression. I don't want you to think that I'm saying good design costs a lot and that that's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's negative necessarily. I'm really just asking the question, why does it cost so much? And really, the way I've thought about this episode is that it's going to kind of have half and half the challenge or the problem, if you will, of the cost of good design, and then what the solution is or what solutions can be found, what possible solutions there might be for the average consumer looking to achieve good, typically costly design. Now, I've been thinking about this for a while, and a lot of it really leans into why Hemby Home Company exists to a certain extent. But before we get there, why I finally pulled the trigger on this particular episode, because it has been in the works for a while, but why I finally pulled the trigger on this episode is because I was listening to a podcast interview with Zoe Feldman. She is a Washington, D.C. based designer, and I was listening to an interview on a podcast, Ariel Oken's podcast, and Ariel is another interior designer. She's based, I think, in kind of the New York, Connecticut area. And Ariel was interviewing Zoe and talking about, the different levels or price points for her design business. And the way that she explained it, she has kind of 3 tiers of design pricing, if you will. So the first tier or the first level is her regular full service interior design package. Now, on the particular podcast episode that I listened to with her, and I've listened to other episodes or other podcasts and interviews that she's been on, she didn't necessarily break down the cost of those or of, the typical range for those full service packages. But we can assume it's fairly expensive. That's not shocking to me. What was shocking to me when I was listening to this episode is the second level. So she has her full service package, and then the second tier is her Design Anywhere tier, and then on the absolute lowest level, if you want to call it that, but not in a derogatory way, she does the Expert. And I mean, even on the Expert, I'm assuming that she charges anywhere from $300 all the way up to maybe $3,000 for an hour-long consultation. Back to her Design Anywhere concept. So that's kind of her mid-tier. She stated in the interview that she started it, the impetus for her starting this Design Anywhere concept was that she recognized or realized that there were quite a significant number of potential clients that they had been turning away over and over. And the reason was, and she said it, I believe she said it like this, she kind of said, I don't want to call those small budgets, but they were small budgets. She says, because, $100, $200, $300,000 is a lot of money. So essentially they had been turning away clients with $300,000 budgets because that's too small for a full service package. And they decided to kind of add this other level in that was a reduction essentially in their services, but allowed those people with those smaller budgets to experience her work and her level of expertise and knowledge. And she said she didn't want to call those budgets small, but to her, that is not enough for a full service package. So that statement just stuck with me. And she's right. That is a lot of money. It's not a small budget. But she's also right that in the work that she does and the kind of work that she does as a full service interior designer, $300,000 is just not enough for that kind of project. And that was the part that kind of really got me thinking I needed to pull the trigger in terms of recording this episode. Because I think that, or I'm fairly confident actually, that the majority of consumers, again, average middle America, earning about $65,000 a year, living in a $450,000 house, these people don't understand what it actually costs to do an interior design project at the level at which we're seeing it in magazines. The designers that we are seeing who have been featured on Architectural Digest or who have been part of the Architectural Digest 100 or have been in Veranda, I'm thinking about Bunny Williams, I'm thinking about Katie Rosenfeld, I'm thinking about Ariel Oken. These designers are spending so much money, the clients of these designers are spending so much money in order to achieve what you're looking at in a magazine and saying that you want, that you would like to replicate. And so I think when Zoe said that, it kind of helped me to put this in fresh perspective once again, that if the majority of people that I am working with are buying a home for, goodness, maybe up to $1 million, but that's probably the ceiling in my local market. It's close to 800 grand at the very top. But if you're buying a house for 800 grand, and most people I'm working with are not, they're buying one for closer to 350 or 400, maybe 500, and that's the top of their budget, then they're not going to spend the equivalent of what they paid for their house on doing interior design or exterior design on their house. By the sounds of it, most people are spending between 10 and 15% of the purchase price of their home on investing in their home in terms of design. They're not going to spend that same amount of money because that would be insanity and they cannot afford it. And so, I understand that to a lot of people, and even to myself, I would be lying if I said that wasn't a lot of money for me to spend on my own home. But for the majority of people, 300 grand to furnish your home, to furnish and design your home is an extraordinary amount of money. And, that should be that amount. There's a reason it costs that much. But why is that small in terms of what a full service designer at Zoe's level or at Aria's level or at Bunny Williams level is being paid to do a project? And I've thought about this for quite a long time, but there are any number of reasons why it would cost this much. I'm going to limit it to just a few. And I want to kind of focus on these few reasons to help explain this and draw attention to what I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about when they say, oh my goodness, that's so expensive. And I've very intentionally not used the word expensive and just said costs so much. One, because expensive is relative. Two, because cheap has its own connotation. And really, it uses a significant amount of money. That's what we're talking about. So it costs a lot. That takes out the perspective of, quality and just focuses on the amount that it costs. So The first reason that I believe this is so expensive, or there I am saying expensive. The first reason I believe that good design costs so much is because of the level of custom, or the sheer number of custom pieces that a designer is working with. You have to think about the fact that, in their design, they're not, for the most part, buying chairs from IKEA. They're not buying the curtains from, think of anywhere right now, from Target. These designers are having custom things made, everything down to the carpet or the trim on the curtains, the upholstery on the sofa. All of those things are custom, and custom costs more money than what you can buy off of the rack or off of Amazon. And, there are some ways to kind of circumvent this to a certain extent, or at least achieve a lower price point while having that custom look. And we'll get into that a bit later. But what you need to understand is that when you're seeing, a sofa in a magazine by an AD 100 designer, they didn't just buy the sofa from Crate and Barrel or CB2. I love those stores, by the way. But they probably worked with a luxury furniture designer just for the bones, bought the fabrics separately, had the fabric, had the sofa, then upholstered in that fabric, and all of that adds up. You're paying for the custom piece and the detail that comes with that. Kind of along that same vein are things like custom furniture pieces, so not just upholstery, but a lot of designers have furniture made custom. That can be anything from joinery to fit in the kitchen, or cabinetry, depends where you are, what you call it. But if somebody is building the cabinets from scratch, that's custom, and it's custom for that space. And it's not just cabinetry. A lot of designers have furniture made custom, so a bar or a dining table, that kind of thing. They will also very often work with a craftsman on certain things. They'll have a dedicated carpenter who's putting everything in. So these are not, again, the run-of-the-mill, you can purchase it off of Amazon or a big box store type pieces of furniture. These are not those kind of items. These are designed with intention, using the highest quality materials, taking time because they require an immense amount of attention to detail. And that's what the furniture in these homes typically is. So when you look at it and you think, oh gosh, what sofa is that? It's not just what sofa is that? It's what sofa is that? Did they put unique feet on it? Is it made of a specific material? How was it upholstered? There's a lot that goes into one piece of furniture. And then if you add that up and do an entire house, obviously it gets expensive. Now, even if the furniture itself is not custom, very often there is a custom finish, or there's a type of finish that requires an expert to come in and execute it. Even with paint. And, there is I'm obsessed with Tadlac wall finishing for bathrooms. It's this Moroccan plaster that is waterproof, and it requires someone to come in and install it or put it in place. They need to be an expert who knows exactly what needs to go in. So it's not simply, even with paint, it's not just paint from Lowe's or Home Depot or B&Q if you're in the UK, or Homebase. It's not that they just went in and just bought the paint. Oftentimes it's a custom paint made with Farrow & Ball or Edward Bulmer paints or whoever it is. They needed it in an exact style, and they needed it to be applied in a specific way, and they needed, just those things cost money. And I don't know that we all always think about that kind of thing. I love going into older homes, and I love looking at images of houses and apartments in Paris in particular that have this, really ornate molding or ceiling medallions, that kind of thing. Those cost money to make because those are made by hand. It's not a machine. And so to get that look that you're seeing, in the magazine, you have to recognize the fact that it's a handmade item, and that's why it costs more, or it is going to cost more. Another thing to think about: skill, effort, and attention to detail. And this kind of leads into the experts, and this kind of leads into the custom, but you have to think about the fact that attention to detail is an incredibly large factor. Now, I cannot remember. I think it's, I'm probably going to get this wrong. I think it's Killowen Construction. I'll make sure I link them in the show notes. But Shay McGee of Studio McGee, you see her line at Target, you've seen her Netflix show. She works with this builder, and I believe, again, it's Killowen Construction. She works with him quite a bit, and I've only recently started following him on Instagram, but he posted an image not too long ago of some cabinets that they made. And I'm not sure if they were for a bathroom vanity or for a kitchen, but either way, it doesn't really matter. But the way that this cabinet was made, the wood grain was one single piece that had been cut so it flowed seamlessly across all the doors and down all the drawer fronts. That's not an easy thing to achieve. That's something that takes extra time and takes extra care and attention to detail. And so that is going to drive the cost up. Because if you buy a vanity from, Rejuvenation, or if it is your Crate and Barrel, wherever it is, they're probably not matching the wood grain across the cabinets if you're getting solid wood. That's just not something that is easy to do, and it's not quick to do, and it's not the most efficient way to make things, because you want to use every square inch or every square foot when you're cutting wood, and so you might not necessarily cut it that way. But they've done that. That's going to cost extra money. Speaking of wood, materials. Materials drive costs up. One of the easiest ways, I think, to see this difference in materials is in bathrooms. The majority of Americans are going to Lowe's or Home Depot or Wayfair or IKEA for their bathroom. Let's stick with Lowe's for now. When I was preparing for this episode, I pulled up my Lowe's app, and, on the high end for Lowe's, the highest or the most expensive bathroom tap or faucet, depending on where you are, the most expensive one I saw was, I think, $5,500-ish. And on the lowest end, there's one for $20. They have a very handy feature in the Lowe's app, which allows you to essentially filter the items based on the best sellers. So if I do that, again, looking at bathroom faucets, bathroom taps, the majority of consumers updating their bathrooms on their own, if I'm looking through that best sellers filter, the range is really between $27 and $500, which means that the majority of people are not spending $5,500 on a faucet. They're probably spending right somewhere in the middle, whatever the average of that is, around $250, $300 on a faucet. Why am I bringing this up? The point that I'm making is designers are not using the $27, the $27 tap or the $100 tap. They are much more likely using the $5,000 one, or at the very least between $500 and $5,000 one. So let's say a designer is doing a bathroom with, modestly a $2,000 faucet. That's what they've chosen. And it's a primary bathroom with 2 sinks. Just the faucets or the taps, just the faucets or taps alone, we're already at $4,000. That doesn't include the light fixtures, again, likely 2 of those, or the vanity itself, if it's not a custom one, and it doesn't include the tile or the window dressing. So do you see where I'm going? The choice of materials drives the cost up. And the truth is that you can feel the difference between a cheaper lightweight faucet and a heavyweight well quality one. And the same goes for tiles, for paints, for fabrics. The better the quality, the higher the cost. So going back to that bathroom example, a whole bathroom suite could be as little as $4,000 for maybe the average American person doing their home. They buy an $800 tub. They spend maybe $300 on the shower. They replace a vanity with one that you can just buy that's one piece. Let's say that's on a really low end, $600, on a maybe higher end, $2,000. But you could maybe do a whole bathroom for $4,000. But if a designer's doing it, that $4,000 could be the cost of the taps alone or the faucets alone, with a whole bathroom suite costing upwards of $30,000. So, people love the Toto toilets. I think they're incredible. But that's like an $8,000, I think, $7,000 toilet. That's more than some people are going to even be willing to invest in their whole bathroom. but that's what a designer is using. So you have to just understand materials. Now, again, my market is fairly representative of the majority of America. The average house costs $450,000. The homeowners are unlikely to be spending $30,000 on their bathroom because they're not going to get that back, number one. And number two, they're already shopping at the top of their budget just in our current real estate market. So let's talk about what can be done to make that tier, that quality of design more accessible after my thing of the week. My thing of the week this week, and I think it's partially coming off of my conversation with Jennifer Vreeland McDermott, and then also a conversation I had recently with a friend, is really layout. I think as a realtor, I understand that, layout is pivotal when it comes to selling a house or buying a house. But I think many people underestimate how important it is. And a bad layout can leave a house sitting on the market for a really long time. A good layout can be the clincher, even if the design is not ideal. When I think about my house, I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast. When I picked my house, layout was critical because I wanted to be able to accommodate family. I wanted to be able to have enough bathrooms. And I knew, buying when we bought and buying what we bought, that we weren't going to be able to make any structural changes to the property. I am a big fan of Gil Schaefer. Maybe one day I'll have an episode where I don't bring up his name once. But in his book, Home at Last, there's one building that he designed the floor plan to be a specific shape in order to maximize light coming into the home and also make sure that the house was fairly unassuming when you approached it from the street, so that it wasn't kind of an in-your-face opulence, but it was a house that it kind of unfolded in front of you as you went through it. And that level of thought when it comes to a layout blows my mind. It really does. But I want to think about, and I guess talk about some of the pain points or pleasure points, if you want to call them that you can get from a good layout. Something that we didn't think about with our house. And, we were not building a house custom, so our options were limited and we needed specific things like, 2 bathrooms on the main floor, 3 bedrooms on the main floor, that kind of thing. But something that we didn't think about was narrow pass-through areas. I wish all of our walkways were wider. We have really narrow walkways. I know that this sounds really silly, but go ahead and pull up the America's House Plans website or a Southern Living House Plan website and just look at the floor plans. Explore what you're drawn to, explore why, look at what's narrow and what's wide open, and just explore the possibilities. I'm just currently geeking out over those and thought I'd share that with you all. All right, let's get back to the episode. Let's talk fixes, guys. We need to talk fixes because, let's be real, if you've scrounged and saved to buy your $450,000 house and you want it to look like a house that you saw on television or in a magazine, you do not have the budget to make that happen. So here are a few tips on things I think you can and should do and can and shouldn't do to achieve great design quality on a budget. And I say that because we're not trying to look high end and be cheap. We're trying to achieve great design quality regardless of budget. All right, here we go. Number 1, don't do short-term peel and stick fixes. Please don't hate me. Peel and stick is a great temporary fix for temporary housing. You live in a rental, it's ugly, you can put something on that, cover it up, that's great. It's temporary, you're going to take it down when you leave. I don't like peel and stick as a permanent solution because it isn't permanent. I know oftentimes people will use it to cover up an ugly floor or an ugly backsplash or an ugly wall, and I think it's just better to either actually deal with it, so replace it with another permanent solution, or to cover it up with a rug or with cookbooks and tchotchkes, until it's possible for you to address it permanently. So if it's just, and I mean honestly, before I did peel and stick tile over another tile, I would probably just take out the tile, patch up the wall and paint it before I did peel and stick, if it's my house. Do something that is classic and timeless, if that's your style, and can stand the test of time. Don't peel and stick temporary solutions. They don't stick because they're not supposed to. I mean, they do stick, but what I mean is they don't last because they're not supposed to. So go for something permanent. Next, number 2, shop with discernment and invest where it counts. And this ties into what I just said too, to a certain extent. Do not compromise on quality when it counts most. I personally believe that you almost always notice the quality difference between a cheaper made product and one that has been expertly crafted with solid materials. But, unless you have bottomless pockets, everybody has a limit. So where do you compromise? Not everybody can do the $8,000 toilet. Maybe you need the $200 one. Here's where I think you shop with discernment and invest where it counts. Invest in the items that are regular touch points. So these are things like the carpet or the flooring under your feet, the curtains that you open every morning and close at night, the faucets that you use in the kitchen and in the bathroom, the toilet that you sit on, the sheets you sleep on, and the mattress. You might not think about the sofa you sit on or the dining chair that you sit on as regular touch points either, but those need to be comfortable. So they are worth investing in, and if they're good quality, they'll last. The challenge with this is, if you go for quality and you're going for something that's going to last, you're most likely going for something that's timeless versus trendy. People don't always like that. But timeless stands the test of time, hence timeless. So don't be so pulled in by trends that you feel like you have to go trendy over quality. You can add in those trendy things on the side or as kind of elements versus making them the whole event. Speaking of quality, I think also generally you want to go for solid materials versus composite materials, which this is different to if they're recycled. I would say that pretty consistently in my house, my family, partially because my husband has done a lot of work with wood. He's done a lot of woodworking. We buy solid wood over something with a wood veneer, for example, because I know it's going to stand the test of time. Or I'll buy a solid ply material from an IKEA occasionally, but really we go for solid wood whenever we can. If it's stone, then I think recycled stone is great. And I think, like I said, with the IKEA, good plywood can be a great material too. Just do your research when it comes to materials, and when possible, go for naturally occurring substances versus man-made ones. I do have very moderate. Whenever I say moderate, I think of those ads that are like moderate to severe psoriasis. But anyway, going off topic. I do have very moderate regret over my kitchen countertops because I've learned a lot since putting them in about some of the harmful ways that quartz is obtained and processed. But I also know that for our budget and life stage, it made the most sense. Granite would have been another option as well, which is less harmful. Shop outside of the box. This is point number 3. I've said this before, I will say it again. Don't just shop at your local big box place, HomeSense, Dunelm, Target, Walmart, Home Goods. Notice I'm not saying don't shop there ever. I'm saying, just don't only shop there. You can decide to never shop there. That's your own choice. But really, I think for great quality at a lower quality price, you need to shop smart. So, and this goes back to discernment, but you'll have to look in different places. So shop on Facebook, shop on Etsy, shop estate sales. And you can actually do estate sales in person or online. There are a number of ways or websites now where you can actually do an estate sale online, which is great, very convenient. Granted, you can't touch the things, but still. Shop thrift stores or secondhand shops if you're in the UK. Get on First Dibs and Cherish and Pomono and look for things that are good quality but might need some love to get back to full glory. A little elbow grease is worth the lower price. You can also get a solid older piece of furniture for cheap and then reupholster it with a better fabric. So don't limit yourself to thinking I have to get this item and it has to be exactly how I need it to be when I find it. You can make changes to things. This kind of shopping requires patience. So just be prepared to wait for the right items to present themselves. Don't rush it. Okay, last tip. Hire the expert. I would have said a number, but I've lost track. Hire the expert. Know when to DIY and when not to. Splurge for good workmanship. Hire the painter who costs more, but who you know does an absolutely impeccable job. Hire the expert for the standout feature or the wallpaper installation or the upholstery job, because if it's going to be done, you want it to be done well. There are some things you can probably do on your own, but if you're not good at tiling, hire an expert tile person and pay them to do it. It's worth it. Don't feel like, well, I have to do it to save money. Save money and then pay someone to do it so it's done well. Because what you don't want is to spend your hard-earned money buying this really great tile, poorly installing it, and then having to look at how you wasted money or how you put money in and made it look terrible. If you're going to do it well, get the expert. And speaking of hiring experts, you can hire us. There is so much that goes into furnishing a house. You're choosing finishes for every room. There are just so many tiny details. And the best part of working with Hemby Home Company is that we don't see $300,000 as a small budget. That's enormous. The whole impetus for our company is helping ordinary people in ordinary homes achieve quality and beautiful living with their budgets. So we work with your budget to help you achieve what you want within your means. For example, we do flat service design consultations, and those start at $200, and they are guaranteed a specific price, and you know exactly what you'll receive upon completion. For our larger projects where you might be working on a whole house or need more than a mood board, we offer an initial consultation, and then after that we develop a project scope that involves an estimated timeline and a budget based on what you've told us you'd like to spend and what we know is realistic based on what you'd like to do in your own home. It's really important to us that whatever the size of your project, you are fully aware of the cost and fully in control of your budget. We want to make it possible. Good design is not cheap, and it shouldn't be. But that doesn't mean that it can't be affordable. I think we often conflate those two terms, but affordable doesn't mean low costing necessarily. I think it speaks more to accessibility than price point. And I think even though good design doesn't have a low price point, it is still accessible. Anyway, that is it for this week's episode. I've included a link to our design services page in the show notes so you can take a look at our offerings and see how we can help you live beautifully. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time.